G'day everyone, how's it going? Coming at you from the home studio. I just got done on a little mini shoot and yeah, just here to chat through the details of the Canon 1DX Mark III. Now I have put that on a order, or they're going to tell me when it comes in available here in Australia. So I'm pretty keen to shoot with this camera as my A camera for what I do. I've been extensively using the EOS R recently, also added the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K to the lineup. So I'm using the EOS R with EF lenses adapted to the camera with the control ring adapter. So the 1DX Mark III kind of makes a lot of sense to as an upgrade and as an A camera. It still gives me the ability to shoot stills on it. And yeah, it's just going to be something that I'm going to, if when it comes available, I have the resources and the finances to be able to do it through my business, then I think I'm going to be purchasing that camera. Now, I just want to let you know that I'm actually on a water fast at the moment. So bit of a crazy thing, but I'm doing a 10-day water fast to just kind of cleanse my body and also spiritual reasons for my faith as well. So bear with me if I do get out of breath in this video, but hope you all had an amazing Christmas and New Year as well with the family. And yeah, hopefully it was a blessed time for you and you're looking at 2020 with fresh eyes and ready to hit the ground running in everything that you're going to be doing in 2020. So let me just pull up the specs to the 1DX on my computer here, and I'm going to scroll right down through to the video modes on this camera because I don't really care for photography on this, but it is an incredible photography camera if you're needing that for photography. But let's go, boom. So movie recording, it has, it's just an MP4 recording format, and it shoots in a compressed H.264 AVC, which is a 4208-bit that we've come to know pretty well as Canon shooters. And you know, same on the 5D Mark IV and other prosumer level models. And also it shoots in 422 10-bit. So it's interesting to see that in the first iteration recorded to the cards of a Canon, you know, level, a DSLR level camera. So that's awesome. Also, which is crazy, and I know it's going to be a massive file size based on the specifications of the megabits per second of the actual file size, but the raw files it will shoot in 60p raw. And I think that the raw is actually 5.5K. So it's actually 5K image coming out of the raw capabilities of this camera, which is insane. That's just off the charts, amazing. So it's going to shoot in raw also at 29, 25 or 24 or 23.98 shooters at approximately 1800 megabits per second, which is going to be a massive, obviously massive file size as well. So you might only get, you know, 15 minutes out of a 256 gigabyte card, but it still does it. It's got the capability to do it. So if you were shooting a small micro piece, then having that capability with the raw 12-bit, you know, 422, it's actually got an ITUR BT709 and also a BT 2020. So I'm not sure if that's a setting in the back of the camera or not, where you can switch between BT 709 BT 2020. You can do that on the EOS R when you're shooting in Canon log. So all these frame rates I'm suggesting now as well, after the raw is all Canon log. So once you're set in Canon log, you can shoot those. So 12-bit raw is pretty amazing. As I said again, it's going to be massive file sizes. So there's a limitation there with what, you know, the amount you'll be able to shoot with the 4K raw, or sorry, 5K raw settings. But then we drop down into the 4K settings, which is basically 4K DCI up to 60p all-I, which is a 940 megabits per second file size, which is probably pretty decent file size actually. You might be able to get, you know, 30 minutes of shooting out of a 256 gigabyte card with that type of file size. 4K DCI, it's got as well in IPB, which is a smaller, you know, more compressed codec, and then it's got 29, 25, 24 in a 470 megabits per second codec, which is a nice 25 I use generally here in Australia, 25 or 23.98 if I do anything in 24, conform to 24. So that's a good codec for me at 470 megabits per second in the all-I, which will be quite a bit onto a 256 card. It's got 4K DCI in a cropped mode, which again is the 60 frames per second frame rate. What I understand from that is that you actually access autofocus as well when you're in the cropped mode. So 4K DCI cropped, 60p and 50p, or 59.94 and 50p is all-I at 940 megabits per second, and that will have the autofocus enabled. But the other codecs, the full frame 4K, and it isn't a cropped 4K on the new 1DX Mark III, it's actually a full frame 4K, which is amazing as well. Something Canon shooters have been waiting for a long time with the DSLRs, is not having a crop factor. I actually but I actually don't mind the crop factor on the EOS R because it gives me extra reach. So for shooting things like events, wildlife, anything sort of where you're wanting to get that extra reach, even in interviews, it's great for shooting a smaller lens, like a 24mm lens, a wider lens, but getting greater reach if you're cropping in and shooting in 4K. So I've always actually utilized it quite well, but having full frame 4K is just awesome. So yeah, basically the crop mode will allow you to still shoot in 4K and have that great resolution, obviously on a smaller portion of the sensor on the camera. But seeing as the camera senses a 5.5K sensor, so you're not really going to be losing much quality by cropping in, and then you get the access to your autofocus. But if you're doing piece to camera interviews with this camera and you're wanting to get, not have the autofocus and you're wanting to shoot full frame 4K, then maybe this is not the camera for you. But again, if it's matching up with something like a Blackmagic Cinema Pocket Cinema 6K or a Red even in the high 10-bit codec, the high-end codec, then you might set your focus as you would using cine lenses on a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera or a Red, where you're going to be setting manual focus anyway. And that just means, you might work with a lens that's a little bit longer with the subject a little bit further away, or you might work with a wider aperture, not as closed down on your aperture. I'm always shooting with this EOS R at 1.4 because I like how it looks, but it's got the autofocus on as well. So you get that compression and you get that ability to move around in the frame. But using the 1DX, that's just a little caveat there. You might want to shoot 4K full frame, and in that case, you're going to have to figure out how to focus your subject correctly. So then breaking it down, it's got some other UHD, 4K UHD, again 940 megabits per second for that codec, down to 120 megabits per second for the IPB in that codec. And then you come into your HD settings, your full HD. So you've got approximately 180 megabits per second for your 59.94 60p and your 50p all-I codec, which is quite good, I think, for 50 and 60p in full HD. So that's a really good full HD codec, I think, coming out of this camera. Now, the RAW capabilities on this is pretty crazy because, you got a 5.5K image. Obviously, the file size is massive, but it's going to be something that if you're shooting a small cinematic piece, it's going to be pretty good to use for that sort of stuff. And I think it'll be awesome to be able to shoot in 60p as well in RAW. That's just amazing. So the 120 frames per second is really good, but it does not record audio. So that's something I think that, I guess you're not going to be needing really audio in 120 frames per second, but sometimes you want some environmental noise and stuff to put over, your images and stuff like that. So you'd have to sort of shoot something as well in 60 and then utilize that 60p audio on the 120p sequence or something like that, or use some sound design to make it happen. If you can hear in the background, my son is cracking it because they just got home, so he's a little bit tired. Anyway, I'm just going to keep cracking on with these specs. Battery life, they've really increased and improved. So not sure on the 1DX Mark II, but this will shoot for 4 hours and 40 minutes at room temperature. And that is in a HD 25 frames per second standard IPB codec. So maybe with a high-end codec, it might not shoot for 4 hours, but you can imagine as a video shooter coming from 5D Mark IV or the EOS R, which might shoot for 2 hours continuously in video mode. Well, this thing can shoot for 4 hours, or that's certainly what the specs say. And in a low temperature environment, around 0 degrees Celsius, it can shoot for, I'm just gonna close this door quickly. Joys of having the office and studio at home. So this will shoot for approximately 4 hours and 10 minutes at a low temperature of 0 degrees. So that's awesome as well. I think, who is this camera for? I feel like this camera is probably for hybrid shooters, again, those who are doing commercial work and commercial photography, sports photographers, absolutely. But in the video space, who is this for? Well, I think it's probably for mid-level creators. You know, if you look at a fully rigged out Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K, then you're looking at, you know, $3.5 to $4 grand Australian dollars for the actual body itself. And then you add your EF lenses, you add in your battery that you need, you know, additional battery because the thing has got a 45-minute battery life. You add in your recording media to that, where you're buying a little SanDisk Extreme. I don't have it here right now, but little SanDisk SSD to record onto. So you're adding those layers to other cameras as well. If you look at an EOS R fully spec'd out with RF lenses, you're looking around about the $4,000 to $5,000 mark Australian as well. Probably like wouldn't get much for 4,000, less than 4,000 US dollars for the EOS R. So I feel like this sits in between. Then we jump up to say the C200, which I think has similar raw, 12-bit kind of raw or cinema or Canon raw codec coming out of that camera. And I feel like this 1DX Mark III kind of sits in between, say, an EOS R or 5D Mark IV and a C200. So for me, I'm not really wanting to go up to like a C200 level yet, you know, looking at 10,000 Aussie dollars or thereabouts for something on the second-hand market here. I'm actually wanting to get something midway between those two. So that's why the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K and 6K was kind of a really good happy medium for us. We could shoot raw with that camera, and it was in that right price range for us of around, I think, 6,000, you know, fully kitted out with a good lens and stuff as well. So now if you look at the autofocus features, the frame rate, the amount of frame rates, the sheer amount of frame rates is just incredible on this camera, and the ability to shoot in raw 5K, then it's a close runner against something like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K, I think. And I feel if that image quality is there in those codecs that Canon have made, and also if this camera can really win in terms of the color accuracy, the color science that we know as Canon shooters is being awesome, well, I think this is a real winner of a camera. So I just wanted to come in and chat through the specs of it. And yeah, if you're kind of in that mid-tier of thinking you want to upgrade from the 5D4 or the EOS R to something like a C200 in that cinema line, then maybe the Canon 1DX Mark III in that middle ground is going to be something that will work for you. The other final thing that I'll talk about is you obviously need new media. So you won't have to upgrade lenses or anything like that, but you're going to need new media to go with that camera. So it's the CFast Express, a new recording media format. It's like the CFast cards, but a smaller card. So you're going to need to upgrade your media, and I think, you know, having carding up, as I say, that having like two 256 gigabyte cards or two 512 gigabyte cards is going to give you enough to shoot like a wedding or, you know, a whole piece to camera or something for a client, you know, two 512 gigabyte cards. So that's going to be an expense that's going to be added onto the camera body itself. And I was in the frame of mind that I might move to like a Pro EOS R type body when that is released. But I think in the interim, I've still got all my EF lenses. So something like the 1DX Mark III actually represents good value if it is that price point that we're hoping for, which is around the 6,000, 6,000 to 7,000 Aussie dollars, maybe 5,000 to 6,000 US dollars. That remains to be seen how much they're going to charge for it. They might be upping the ante from the 1DX Mark II and charging a lot more for this camera. So we just don't know what that's going to be. But if it is in the right price range, and, you know, the first tests and everything when you know, creators get their hands on these first test bodies, and we see some still images, we see some videos shot from this camera, and it looks the goods, then it might end up as part of our kit. I was actually planning soon in February, I have an event to shoot. I was planning on getting another EOS R for that event because we can set one up with an external recorder and record 10-bit out of that. And then we can just have a second shot, like a safe shot, a wider shot, just recording in the internal 8-bit codec. So I was planning on getting 2 EOS Rs and maybe moving to an RF lens for that, you know, wider angle EOS R with an RF lens, nice and sharp. But I think maybe I'll stick with my Canon EF lenses for now and upgrade to the RF lenses at a later stage once a Pro EOS R or Pro mirrorless body comes out, more than, you know, and something that has more than what the EOS R offers right now. We know the crop mode's there, the crop factor's there in 4K. We know there's some limitations with codecs as well. You know, your high frame rate and is only 720. It's not 1080, and your 4K 60 isn't there on the EOS R. So maybe the 1DX Mark III is kind of that interim camera. And I always did like the 5D Mark IV as well, as a camera that you could kind of hold and really grip onto, and you know, you could hang on to that camera. You could really use it as a bigger feeling camera, like it had a lot of weight to it. You put it on a gimbal like a glide cam, and it had a really good feel to flying that on the glide cam, which I still use. I don't actually own an electronic stabilizer yet. So, you know, flying a camera like that on the glide cam is really nice. And similarly, the 5D Mark IV was really good as well. The 1DX Mark II was really good on a gimbal, but the EOS R is a little bit lightweight. It's kind of a lightweight thing on a gimbal, so it actually works better with an electronic gimbal for the EOS R. Anyway, that's a little side note, little caveat, a little rabbit hole that I'm running down now, and I think I'm rambling, so I'm going to wrap up this video. But thanks so much for watching. If you've watched this far, make sure you give a thumbs up if you've got some value from this content, like and subscribe as well. And in 2020, what are you going to do through your channel, your company, through your film or video, through your photography? What are you planning to do this year? Let me know in the comments. Are you starting a YouTube channel? Are you continuing your YouTube journey, or you're not on YouTube yet? Are you going to start a YouTube channel? Are you going to branch out and start your own company? What are you going to do this year? Maybe you're already on the journey as well as me, and you're doing it really well. So comment below on how you're going, how things are, and what your 2020 is shaping up to be like. You know, we need to set goals as creatives and as business owners and as videographers and cinematographers. I spoke to a friend just last week, and he was talking about doing 6 videos this year. So he's actually working full-time, but he's a super creative guy, loves photography, loves videography, and he said to me he's going to focus on doing one micro piece, one sort of short doco or a short 2 or 3 minute cinematic film every 2 months. So I would encourage you, if you're working as well, if you're not yet, you know, living the dream as such, but you're still working for the man and you want to get out and do some stuff, I would recommend, like, even if you did 3 videos for the year, you did 3 sort of films for the year, that would be awesome, an awesome place to start. And that would get you in the flow of how to do it and how to produce and shoot the content, bring the content into your computer, edit the content. So just leave you with that little tidbit. Comment below how your 2020 is looking, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.